Hi guys, it's Brooke here. I have a super quick favor to ask. When you have a moment, please take just a second to give this podcast a 5-star review. This will help me to continue the podcast and continue to bring these resources to the community. Thank you so much for that 5-star review.
What an amazing opportunity is to connect with your child through eye contact until it's gone. It is a devastating thing to lose. So to have that back was just a miracle. But one of the things that we learned very quickly once we started implementing RDI principles and working with you as our consultant is that Adam was incredibly smart, that he was incredibly motivated, that he wanted to engage, that he wanted to interact, that he wanted the opportunities to problem solve. He was just never given those opportunities in a way that he could process. We learned that he could learn like a child without autism could learn. We just had to slow it down and be a little bit more structured because RDI, it's based upon all of these tenets of natural development.
Hi guys, before we kick off this very first episode, which I'm incredibly excited and nervous to do, I wanted to share a bit about it. In this episode, I sit down and chat with a long-standing client of mine of 16 years. And I chose to kick off the show with this episode because it really speaks to the heart of why I wanted to create this podcast. In this episode, you will hear one mom's journey with autism, in particular, a case where her son experienced significant regression following a doctor's visit. And while not everyone has the regression experience, this was the case for this family. And in this show, Catina describes her experience as a mom processing this incredible loss. As you will hear, I encourage Catina to be open and honest and authentic, and so appreciated that she did so throughout, especially as she shares more about her therapy journey. And I really want to be clear that the intention of the show is not to put programs down, but instead is to bring to light the authentic human experience and share important knowledge, one guest at a time and one episode at a time. With that, I will let Catina take the stage as she does so eloquently. All right. Well, thank you so much, Catina, for being here today. I just really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to have you on today and want to take a minute to share a little bit about you and your amazing journey thus far. But I'll go ahead and share just so that our audience knows a little bit more about you. So Catina graduated number 4 in her class at UNLV with a degree in broadcast and print journalism and served for many years as the marketing and public relations director for Deloitte, Nevada. During her time in Las Vegas, Catina also served as communications director, fundraising chair, and eventually president of FEAT of Southern Nevada, Nevada's largest nonprofit, which serves individuals with autism and their families. And Catina has provided pro bono PR services for Terry Inc., a large nonprofit based in Southern California, which also serves individuals with special needs and their families. And she's a fierce advocate for her son, Adam, as well as for many families who have children with autism. And Catina is a co-author of the Beyond series, which I love. I've read the series. Fabulous. Highly recommend it. And spent several months on the 4 #1 best-selling Amazon lists. Congratulations. I did not know that. So I learned something new.
Yeah, that was exciting. Thank you.
So exciting and well-deserved. And she continues to write in her very limited free time. She's been married to her college sweetheart for 30 years and says her greatest accomplishment is the awesome family she and her husband, Scott, have created. So welcome, Catina. Thank you again for being here. I'm really excited to talk with you today and just have an interesting conversation. We've worked together for many years, I think 16 years. So we've been on this journey for the last 16 years and just working with you and alongside you. I can only say like you are extremely knowledgeable, take a lot of time to research and really invest in learning. And, being a mom to Adam, we'll get into your journey in a minute, but I've just been a witness to how much time and money and effort that you invest in learning about this field and how to best support him and how to help others as well. You've helped countless families, and I just really appreciate that so much. And was one of the many reasons I was excited to have you on today so we could have this interesting conversation. And I will share, our role, just so our audience knows, is I am an RDI consultant and have been working with your family in that 16 years. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about on this podcast was, looking at the field and what is the field of autism like these days. And you and I have talked a lot about this idea of, really the importance of treating individuals with an autism diagnosis with dignity and respect, while also meeting them where they're at and creating opportunities for growth. As we want to honor them, we want to accept them and as a unique human being who has ideas and opinions and values. And we also want to give them opportunities to grow and to learn and discover. So I'd love to have this conversation so that we can talk about how this has unfolded for your family and your journey. And I think everybody has a unique journey. As we know, every family with a child that has autism has their own story to tell, and they're all very individualized and unique. And I think it's so important and valuable to be able to share your story, as an opportunity to possibly help others, to inspire, to maybe bring some new information to the table. And so I just really appreciate you being willing to share that.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about it from the beginning, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And, please feel free to be fully transparent and authentic, whatever feels right for you to share. This is the space to do so. If you could just kind of start from the beginning with your journey and tell us a little bit more about, that process for your family.
Sure. So Adam is our first baby. We have 4 children, and Adam was the first, and he is 26 years old now. He was born, he was almost 10 pounds at birth, and we were just over the moon, my husband Scott and I, to become parents. He was born extraordinarily healthy and robust. As I said, 10 pounds, something like 22 inches long, nailed all of his APGAR scores in the hospital, and just developed beautifully his first year of life, was playing, initiating games like peekaboo and games of catch with the ball, stealing people's hats, you running to the doorbell to see who it was when someone would knock at the door. Just, I was a first time mother, so I guess I wasn't completely educated with regards to every single milestone first baby should be hitting, as I guess any first time parent really isn't. But everything appeared to be beautifully on track. He was very social. He was beginning to talk. He slept beautifully. He ate beautifully. And then we noticed that after one of his well checks, shortly after his first birthday, he got extraordinarily ill. And he was very, very ill for the better part of 10 days, and horrible fever and just every symptom you can imagine. I won't go into the details, but very, very sick. We were very worried. We had him back to the doctor several times, and he did eventually get over this illness. But we noticed that when he started to recover physically, things were different. We thought maybe with the fever being so high that perhaps he had lost his hearing because he stopped answering to his name and stopped running to the door when the doorbell would ring. He stopped smiling. He started crying throughout the night, screaming. He was sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night, as babies do. And that went to him sleeping, if we were lucky, 2 hours a night. And the rest of the night, he was up, arching his back and screaming as if he were in tremendous pain. So that, as you can imagine, resulted in several trips to the emergency room for x-rays and diagnostic tests, because babies just don't do that. And it happened so quickly for him. We knew something was wrong, and we were just sent home every time saying, he's fine, nothing's wrong. And I knew something was wrong. He lost all of his language. He lost his, seemingly lost his desire to engage and interact with his family, my husband and me. He stopped putting his hands up to be held, to be picked up. He stopped making eye contact with everyone. I mean, he was the biggest flirt. When we would take him, before this regression, when we would take him to Costco, he would peek around my shoulder and smile at anyone and anyone who would look and just to try to get a reaction and to get, he knew that they would say, "Oh, he's so cute. And look at those big brown eyes." And so he was really like instigating engagement interaction with not just family members, but even strangers because he loved the attention. And so all of that went away. He was no longer interested in books or toys. And he just was just struggling so hard to you could just tell that he was confused and afraid. And I tell people, I still had my baby, but it was like we had this empty shell of this person who was afraid and confused and hurting. And we couldn't find anybody who could give us any answers. Our pediatrician would say, "Well, boys develop later than girls." And I would say, it's not that he's not developing. He was developing and lost that. We have a regression here. He has lost things that he had. And we just couldn't find anybody to help us for the first year of these symptoms happening. We had no doctors or no health experts or professionals that could provide any answers as to why this had happened. They tried to pretty much blow it off. And so that's how things started.
That is a really long period of time as a mom to have to go through seeing doctors, trying to get answers, and getting nowhere. And I can't imagine how traumatic that was.
Yeah, for sure. The most devastating thing we had ever experienced, Scott and I, up to that moment, and to this day, by far the most devastating thing that I've ever experienced.
Mhm.
I cried for 6 months
Yeah.
after he received his diagnosis. But yes, you feel, and I know what a premature death feels like because I've experienced that in my life where someone dies way too young. And this felt like that. Something that you had that was beautiful and whole and perfect and complete that has just been taken unexpectedly and quickly,
Mhm.
abruptly.
Yeah.
And it felt very much like a death. The only difference was there was no moving forward from that because my baby, my child, continued to suffer and experience this trauma every day of his life. So there was no closure or moving forward. And not that I'm saying death is any easier. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the difference is there's no moving forward from
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I know I've heard your story and it's devastating. And, my heart breaks for the experience that you had as a mom. I can in a very, very slight way relate to it when my daughter had Guillain-Barré and just the feeling of all of a sudden out of nowhere, like the rug gets pulled from under you and I had this very, very small dose of that when we were turned away and the doctor said she was fine and she wasn't fine and she had to be hospitalized and she could have died had I not pushed it further within a week or two. So it's, you know, being in those positions can be very traumatizing, and to have that very long period of time, is going to have a lasting impact. And I'm sorry for that experience that you had just from one mom to another and, how deeply impactful that is. And, you know,
right. And I think, just something that's so important for people to understand is that our story is far from unique.
Mhm.
And it's not like, oh, the poor Haverlocks, they have this very unique, they're outliers. We now, I believe the latest numbers from the CDC are 1 in 34 children
Mhm.
will be diagnosed with autism. And we're seeing very, very similar stories of rapid regression, that kids who were born typical and developed beautifully and then had an inciting incident and lost everything. So the good news is we're not alone, but the tragic news is that we're not alone because that means there are other families and individuals who have the same type of story, who understand very keenly what Adam has been through and what our family has been through. So,
Absolutely. And I think, gosh, there's just so much more information we need to discover and more work needs to be done in our field, in our health system. So let's talk about the diagnosis. How old was Adam when you got the diagnosis and kind of what were your next steps after that?
sure. So Adam, so we self-diagnosed him when we couldn't get any answers. I started doing my own research and the saying, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, I actually had a friend. I was pregnant, just barely pregnant with my second baby and starting to get very, very sick. And I had a friend over kind of trying to help me. And she said, did you ever think maybe Adam could have autism? And I was actually a little bit offended. I was upset that she said that because what little I knew about autism is that these were just kids that injured themselves and never wanted to be hugged. And Adam still, you know, I told you that he stopped really initiating a lot of interaction, but he was still affectionate. We could still hug him and cuddle him. And so I thought it can't be autism because he accepts affection, sometimes even initiates it, and he's not hurting himself. So there's no way it could be autism, but that's the very little I knew about it. So I did about 5 minutes of research on the computer and went, oh my gosh, you know? And so he was about 1.5 when we knew for a fact that he had autism. And then because I became very sick with my second pregnancy and was hospitalized, there wasn't a lot that I could do because I wanted to march right into a developmental pediatrician's office and say, I know what this is. Let's do the diagnosis. This is not going to change who he is. Let's just get some resources in place and start moving forward. What do we do? So, but because I was so sick with my pregnancy, we had to wait a couple of months before I was healthy enough. And we started the process through our Nevada's early intervention agency. And we had his diagnosis shortly after his second birthday. I'll never forget the day because it was April 10th, 2000, which was my birthday. So not the best birthday present, but we knew. And so we received a diagnosis. I went in much more educated and certain, and professionals were listening. And as I pointed things out, it wasn't super hard to get that diagnosis. So he, at the time, having a diagnosis by age 2 was considered relatively young. So we were fortunate that he received that diagnosis at age 2.
And then what did they recommend from there?
They recommended that a speech therapy from the early intervention agency, who was phenomenal. She was amazing. She's the first person who ever really gave us hope. They recommended that she come to the house once a week for 1 hour and that I bring Adam to a group class at the early intervention agency for 1 hour once a week. Those were the recommendations.
Okay. And how did those go? What were
That didn't help at all. I would try to absorb everything I could from watching the class and watching the speech therapist. And I would go out and, oh, she used little Velcro foods that you could cut in half. I better go get some of those. Oh, she used these kind of blocks. So I would run out and get every type of manipulative or toy or book that she used. And I would get those and try those with Adam. And, we weren't making any progress at all. Just 2 hours of intervention, professional intervention isn't enough. And the type of intervention he was receiving, we realized just wasn't resonating with him and it wasn't helping. So it was a pretty hopeless time because at the time we didn't understand that there would be so much more available that could help him.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I know when we met, he was participating in the ABA program. And at what age did he start that program?
He was 2. So what happened is our second child was born. Our second son, Zach, was born, and my husband was off work and was spending a lot more time with Adam than usual as he was home. And he was just doing a lot of thinking. And he came to me with tears in his eyes one day and said, we have to do more for Adam. This 2 hours a week business just isn't enough. We have to take every penny we have and find the best of the best. And this is when we found Feet of Southern Nevada, the nonprofit that you mentioned in my bio. And we talked to a couple of parents who were doing home ABA programs, applied behavioral analysis. And at the time, and I believe it's still the case, that was what the Surgeon General recommended for individuals with autism. I checked out some books at the library when we actually used to go to the library and check out hard copy books on ABA. And, I read stories of miraculous improvement and even autism diagnoses being reversed. And I thought, well, that'll be us then. If a diagnosis can be reversed, that's going to be us because I will do everything in my power to make sure this happens. So we found an ABA consultant and we hired a staff of 4. And we started an ABA program when he was just a couple months shy of his 3rd birthday. So he was probably about, 2 years and 10 months old when we started a full-blown ABA home-based program where we had an ABA consultant who would come once a month and do a workshop, and where we had ABA tutors who were trained by our consultant who would come in daily and work with Adam several hours a day. So the recommendation was 40 hours a week. So we were doing about 40 hours a week of this intervention.
Wow. And you did 40 hours a week then all the way up until we met when he was 10.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot of ABA. Well, yeah, I'd love for you to share kind of your feeling. Like, how did it feel at that time as his mom, having that kind of therapy, that many hours, the whole experience? I'd love to kind of hear how that felt for you.
It never, ever, ever felt right. And so we kind of did a hybrid of ABA. For one thing, just, you know, having a child that small participate in something for 40 hours a week seemed to me like we were not contemplating the needs of a child, of a toddler. That just seemed like a lot to ask of a baby. That there, I mean, he was almost 3, but still, that's kind of a baby, especially struggling with autism. So I kept firing ABA consultants because I felt like they were too strict and too hard, and that there must be something wrong with this consultant. So after I fired my fourth consultant, I realized, oh, it's really not the consultants. I mean, they're great people. I just hate ABA. And so I didn't like that it was very rote. I didn't like that ABA, and this is not to say that ABA can't be ran in a great way I mean, that it's not, you know, I believe some families are probably pretty happy with their ABA programs. I thought that we were making progress, and we were. I mean, Adam learned to tie his shoe, and he learned to follow instructions, and he learned to sit nicely. And there are some things he learned, but as far as emotional connection, which is what you're really wanting as a parent when you've lost that with your child, ABA has absolutely nothing in place to address that. I'm sorry, but eye contact drills, when you tell a child to look at me and then when they may break that gaze and you tell them, nope, wrong, do it again. I mean, that is not how you regain an emotional connection. And so that's what I say when I hated the therapy. I hated how rote and strict it was for such a small child, for a child of any age, because I don't feel like ABA presumes confidence. I don't believe that ABA understands how much individuals with autism are capable of. And I don't believe it provides the dignity and respect that they deserve as any individual would deserve. And, I don't have to get super detailed, but I'm, discrete child where you are drilling a child again and again and again and telling them no if they get the answer wrong. That sends the message that it's not okay to make a mistake. It doesn't give them an opportunity to learn that mistakes are how we learn. Mistakes are how we grow. Mistakes are how we build confidence within ourselves, and mistakes are okay. And I tell my kids now, I say mistakes are great. That's our mantra. Mistakes are great. They're a natural part of life, not just for individuals who don't have autism. And that was one of the biggest problems I had with AVA is it did not allow these individuals to make mistakes without getting a harsh no. And you're going to have to work harder if you want to get your jelly bean. And so it just seemed so wrong. And so because it seemed so wrong, a lot of the ABA we did is I would take control sometimes and say, we're not doing an ABA session in the classroom. We're taking off and everybody's going to Costco, and then everybody's going to the McDonald's playland, and then everybody's going to the splash pad. And I would take my tutors with me. And I had to adapt because it broke my heart so much to, if I had done it the way that I was being told to do it, he would have spent most of his time at home in a classroom in a chair. And we did not do that. But even the amount of time that he spent in a chair, not in natural environments, was too much for me. So just my mother's heart said, we're not going to do that. And so he had a lot of experiences, even within the ABA program, that a lot of kids, I think, didn't have because I would not listen. I got in trouble a lot of times from my consultants for not clocking as many hours as we should in the classroom, but I didn't care. And if it got bad, I fired them. So
Well, I really appreciate your sharing your own unique story because that's authentic and true to your family. And I think it's important that these kinds of stories be told. And, I think that you trusted your instinct as a mom. And I feel like that is so incredibly important for all moms, but especially moms with special needs kids who are working with professionals who then are relying on professionals to help them. And I think it can inadvertently kind of take away that empowerment, if it's not supported. I think it's so important to support your own instincts and for you as a mom and for all the moms out there to feel that their instincts matter and they are incredibly important. And you have to listen to that because you know your child the best. the professionals don't know your child the best. You know your child the best.
Mhm.
And, I'm just really proud and encouraged to hear one mom standing up for that because I feel like it doesn't always happen. And I think it's so important for
It's
family.
so important. And to clarify, I think that individuals in the ABA community have very good intentions. I know you started in the ABA community, that's where you started. But when you find that there's a method that is based upon the natural points of development and that involves the parents more and that provides all of this incredible parental training and presumes competence. And when you know better, you do better, which is, I know what you did. You found something better. And for us, the way it happened is we had one of Adam's tutors who went away for the summer to Utah, and she worked with a family there who was doing RDI. And when she came back in the fall to work with Adam again, she sat me down and said, Katina, we are missing so much and we're doing it wrong. I was like, what do you mean? And so she started to tell me about this RDI program and just the different way that individuals who were implementing the RDI method would speak to individuals with autism, just using declarative language instead of instructing and telling them what to do, just making statements to see if they could problem solve. And so we just started to change our language from imperative to declarative without having an RDI consultant on board yet, without really having known much, just changing the way that we spoke to Adam. And we saw miraculous things start to happen just by changing the way that we spoke to him. We saw him start to problem solve. We saw him start to pause. We saw him start to perk up and kind of, seemingly listen more. I think he was listening before, but he was more interested in listening because he was given the opportunity to problem solve and to be a participant instead of being instructed all of the time and told what to do. And instead of being told no if he got something wrong, we just changed the way we spoke to him. And when we saw that miraculous, I count it as nothing short of miraculous, because when you've got a child who isn't appearing to show interest in things like that, and all of a sudden they do just by changing the way you speak to them, that seemed very miraculous to me. And it gave me more hope than I had had thus far in our journey. And Adam was about, I think, 8 or 9 years old so we'd been doing the ABA journey for a long time. And so it was just a really bright moment where we had a lot of hope that perhaps we could get a lot more by perhaps considering RDI.
This show is brought to you by Therapeutic Approach to Growth. Therapeutic Approach to Growth helps families with relationship and behavioral needs. Their holistic programs are individualized to honor and respect each family and their autistic son or daughter's sense of self through programs such as relationship development intervention, naturalistic ABA, and animal-assisted services. If you're finding yourself frustrated or discouraged with your current behavioral programs and would like to see more long-term meaningful growth for you and your family, then contact TAG today at www.tagforgrowth, that's TAGFORGROWTH.com, to learn more about how to schedule a consultation or how they can offer you the help your family needs, whether in person, remotely, or in a school setting. Again, that's www.tagforgrowth.com. Well, I love that. I'm so grateful that you had that information. And again, not surprising, you're always on this journey of learning and discovering and trying things that feel right to you, and you went for it. And I'm just grateful that you had such a quick response that gave you, that insight that maybe there was something else out there and maybe this was something to consider. And so I'd love to talk a little bit, and I think it's important to mention, I met your ABA team, your tutors or your one-on-ones, and they were wonderful, as you mentioned, wonderful professionals and so willing and motivated. And this is your own unique story and journey. And it is something that we're not here to, kind of put down one program or lift up another program. It's just talking about what your story was, because your story has power and is valuable and can, potentially help others. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, I think any individual who is in the field to help people with autism has a great heart. I believe that, I mean, with rare exceptions, that if you've chosen this field just for us, once we knew there was something that was better for Adam, and I believe, I will just say better for most kids with autism, we just couldn't go back.
Yeah.
Once we knew better, we had to do better for Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd love to talk about kind of your mindset and the mindset of kind of the differences between as you were transitioning into more of an RDI style and approach. Can you think back on how kind of some of the aha moments that happened and how your mindset changed in that process of kind of what you were focusing on before and how you started to shift your focus?
Sure. I remember one fun thing when we were introduced to you through another parent who was using you as their RDI consultant, was working with you. And you and I had a meeting, one of our first meetings, and you said, and when Adam regains typical eye contact, it'll da 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 da. And you just said it with such confidence. And I remember thinking, oh, Brooke, you're so naive. And doing eye contact drills for years. He was probably never going to get his eye contact back. And boy, even just that was the most beautiful gift because you were right. Within a month or two, his eye contact, he had regained, I mean, close to normal eye contact. And that is something that as a parent, you don't realize how beautiful, what an amazing opportunity is to connect with your child through eye contact until it's gone. It is a devastating thing to lose. So to have that back was just a miracle. But one of the things that we learned very quickly once we started implementing RDI principles and working with you as our consultant is that Adam was incredibly smart, that he was incredibly motivated, that he wanted to engage, that he wanted to interact, that he wanted the opportunities to problem solve. He was just never given those opportunities in a way that he could process. We learned that he could learn like a child without autism could learn. We just had to slow it down and be a little bit more structured because RDI, I mean, it's based upon all of these tenets of natural development. It's just we might have to slow it down and be a little bit more focused on how we present it because we are dealing with an individual with autism, but they can do it. But they can do it. And the more that they realize they can do it, the more they want to do it. So I just remember something as simple as giving Adam a meaningful role in an engagement changed our trips to Costco forever. I remember taking Adam to Costco before we started RDI and just having it be such a miserable experience because he would be running away from me, trying to get out of the cart, pulling things off the shelf, lying on the ground. Just, it was just, but I mean, it's Costco. You've got to go. And this was before online ordering too. And then when I learned that all I had to do was create an interaction, that you can create an interaction out of anything, I could also create an interaction in Costco and give him some responsibilities. He could help me push the cart. He could grab things off of the shelf. He could place items on the conveyor belt. He could use, I could say, I'm looking for the one that has a picture of grapes on it. And then he'd have to problem solve and scan the aisle and pick the right one. And so just giving him the opportunity to participate and be a meaningful participant in the interaction that I'd created made Costco like one of my most dreaded activities of the week to one of the things that I look forward to the most, just simply because he had a meaningful role and knew that he could contribute.
Beautiful. Well, and I think it's just a great example of having a shared experience. What we say in RDI, it's a we do approach, not a you do. And so you were guiding him and giving him opportunities to feel successful and competent, developing that internal motivation and showing him that he is of value, that he is a meaningful contributor to the family. And
Yes.
I think that is so motivating. That feels good for any of us to feel like we're meaningfully contributing. And that is such a beautiful example. I'm so glad you were able to kind of illustrate that and share that example because, anybody can do that, and you can do that anywhere in many locations. And, it's just a matter of slowing down and providing the right structure for the child to be successful and competent. So
Absolutely.
I think the other piece too that I know you shared was the eye contact and, what a beautiful gift to be able to connect on an emotional level. And we say eye contact we're looking at engagement. We're looking at the facial expressions and the connections and the feeling connected to another human, right? We want to have meaningful relationships with each other, especially those in our family. And we know through studies that having meaningful and connected relationships leads to longer life and leads to happiness more than anything else, right? These are the things that mean the most to us as humans. So why would we not focus on that for individuals that have an autism diagnosis? Of course, they want those things and deserve to have those things. And that should be the priority, in my opinion, more than learning skills. It's what makes us human. And we deserve to have that we have a right as a human to have those connections emotionally, to feel important and supported and to feel connected within our family.
Everyone should have that right. Absolutely. Everyone should have that right. And that is what I love so much about RDI is that Adam and every individual with autism should have that right. They should have the opportunity to know that they can develop meaningful relationships. And often when people ask me the difference between RDI and ABA or why we chose RDI, I say to them, would you accept if I had it to give and I offered you $20 million with only one caveat? And the caveat is that you may not have any relationships. You can keep your house, you can stay where you live, you can keep your job or not. You have $20 million, you may not want a job. You can travel, you can do anything that you want. You've now got an unlimited amount of money, but you cannot have any relationships. Forget about a significant other, forget about children, forget about parents. You just have the money. Would you do it? And I've never had anyone say, yeah, I'd do it for the money. Everyone understands how critically important relationships are to having a happy life. And that's the name of this intervention, relationship development intervention. And to my knowledge, is one of the only interventions that focuses on remediating these relationship deficits that have happened to individuals with autism. Something went wrong in their development, that this breakdown in relationships and being able to co-regulate or engage in a back and forth interaction with a partner that is broken down, and to be able to remediate that and restore that and repair that is such a beautiful thing. And so I do feel like this intervention, it understands that these kids are individuals who feel and who desire and have emotions and goals and perspectives and opinions of their own. And it's just when you implement this intervention, it helps them to unlock all of those things. And it helps their guides, that they're being an apprentice. It helps the guide to know how to help them unlock everything that has been locked up for so long, be able to unleash that. So
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned the term assuming competence before. And I think that is a testament to that, believing that they are capable of all of those things that you just mentioned, having that desire to show and to remediate so that they can see that they are so capable. And as you mentioned earlier too, when they start to feel good in that role, you want more. That's just human nature. And so it just builds on it. I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of the experience, is that one thing leads to another and it really supports itself. So you build this beautiful foundation, and then the foundation grows until you have this great structure and this relationship. And then the sky's the limit of what you can continue to provide. And so, and as we've talked about, you have a lifetime to learn. You never stop learning. None of us are ever, hopefully ever, going to be in the mindset where we're done learning, right? We're always going to want to continue learning. And that goes for individuals on the spectrum as well. So I think that's a big misnomer, that there's kind of windows of time and, you've missed it, or you didn't miss it, or that's just not true.
and that is very prevalent within the autism community with a lot of interventions. Well, if they're not doing this by this age, it's not going to happen. If they're not doing this by this age, it just isn't in the cards, And that's one thing I love about RDI is RDI will start working with an adult with autism. Adam wasn't an adult when he started RDI, but I know with the growth mindset, knowing that individuals can grow and develop throughout their entire lives, that even adults who may not have had RDI as a child or had a different intervention, it could still be so extremely helpful and quality of life changing.
Absolutely. And that is another nice piece of it, is that it's never too late. It's never too late to continue to grow. And that's a simple way to look at it.
That is for all humankind. And that is I think what you and I are trying to say is that, at least I'm trying to say, is that if we can provide the respect and dignity to individuals with autism, which I think is so often lacking. And I just will remember when I was president of FEET, we held a big fundraiser one time, and we had somebody very prominent in the ABA community come speak. And you had a parent ask a question just saying, I just hate how much my child seems to be hurting and how confused they seem to be. And he said, listen, it is much harder for you as a parent than it is for your child. They don't really know. They're not really hurting. They don't really know. And it is much harder for you as a parent. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, you don't respect these kids at all to disqualify their emotions and what they have been through too. Of course, it's hard in the family because we grieve for them. We grieve for their loss. We grieve for our loss, but we grieve for their loss. But to just dismiss that these individuals with autism are hurting in any way, shape, or form, and that it's really just you as the parent that's missing out. Don't worry too much about the kids. Let that be the least of your worries. I knew then that our ABA journey was going to be short-lived. And again, not to rip on ABA, but I mean, I don't love that. I don't love that that happened. It was a very eye-opening moment for me. And again, this was somebody very, very well-known and very prominent in the autism community who said that. And I thought, this is not good for this entire group of parents to hear that because this is not true. I think a lot of the parents there knew that it wasn't true because they know their children.
Right.
But anyway, that's just
Then going back to the parent instincts too, we know that that's not true as parents, and how confusing and devastating. Again, just not getting the information out there. So again, good intentions as professionals, but sometimes, that's clear misinformation. Hopefully, we've come a long way since then and that mindset, but
so I think we have. I think we get to
evolved a lot. Yeah. Since even 10, 15 years ago, but still always, again, on this journey of learning. We're not done as professionals. We have to keep trying to get better and to learn and to grow and to do better. That journey needs to continue. What advice would you give parents? I know you talk to a lot of parents. Is there anything else that other than what you've already shared, that you would share to parents that are newly diagnosed looking for answers?
I ask parents to contemplate what their priority is for their children. What is your priority? What do you want most for your child? Really think long and hard about that. And I will tell you, there are some parents who say, I want them to learn to spell and I want them to learn math. And, it's not that kids can't learn to spell and learn math if they do RDI, but that's not going to be the first priority, right? As they learn to develop relationships and co-regulate all these things, then these other skills come. But there are some parents who they just want to see them do well academically. If that's your priority, I would say you're probably going to be most happy with an ABA program then. But I ask parents to contemplate the relationship portion. And that's just a discussion I have with every parent that comes to me who is lost and they don't know what to do and they don't know where to go. What is most important to you? I'll share with you what I thought was most important to me and what I found was most important to me. And what was most important to me is that Adam learned to develop relationships, not with just me and his dad, but with other people. That it's super important that he understands he has a responsibility in a relationship to make it happen, as we all do. It's a two-way street. And that I will share with them that he has found the most joy in his life from his relationships. And so I ask parents to contemplate that. And I don't know if this is something that you're looking for or not, but I also ask parents to really find a good doctor, because individuals with autism, more often than not, I would say 9.9 times out of 10 are biomedical train wrecks. There are things going wrong in their bodies that have to be remediated, or there's only so much progress that you can make with any intervention. And if they're hurting or if they're sick inside, if you don't take steps to remediate that with a special doctor, and we've got a great group of doctors, it's called MAPS doctors. And they are doctors who specialize specifically in the biomedical challenges that individuals with autism have. I say you've got to do that, because if your child is feeling sick or in pain, no amount of intervention is going to be as effective as it could be. And we're asking them to do something. It's not fair that we're asking them to put so much work and effort into getting better and forming relationships and problem solving if they don't feel good if they're feeling unhealthy and if they're feeling sick and in pain. So I think that is just a critical part. If I were to give parents advice, please find a good MAPS doctor. They're all over the country, they're all over the world. And maybe that you have to travel, but I would say make any sacrifice you can to, that was actually one of the very first things that we did with Adam before we even started an ABA program or an RDI program, is we started trying to get his health better immediately. And that made a huge difference. So those are two bits of advice I would get. I would tell parents to stand up for themselves and to stand up for their child, and that they have a choice. Oftentimes we have regional centers in California saying, you may have ABA and that is it. We will do nothing else. And that is not true. And that is not right. Because as a parent, if you choose to focus on a more relationship based intervention for your child, you should have that choice. If your priority is that your child start forming relationships and that these relationship breakdowns start being remediated because you think that is going to bring your child the most joy and eventually the most learning and meaning in their life, you should have that choice. You should not be told you have to do one or the other. And so I would say stand up for yourself, stand up for your child, never stop advocating. If it's something you really want, don't take no for an answer. I was told no when we moved to California. I was told no, we absolutely will not do that. And I said, we'll see about that, because I know that this is what's best for my child. I will say also, I had some good ABA associates who were very upset with me when I made the choice to switch to RDI. They felt like I had betrayed them because I was very, very active in the ABA community. I did ABA trainings for our community in Las Vegas. I hired tutors and trained them and placed them within families throughout the entire Las Vegas Valley. So when I said I'm going in a different route, people were very angry with me, and I had to not care, because I care more about Adam and our family than I care about what people think of me. And so you just really have to learn to not care about what people think, and to trust your gut, and to trust what you know is best for your child and what is ultimately going to be best for your family and for their life and for their future. And that is easier said than done. I'm not saying that is easy. It's very, very hard to do these things. These things are not easy. They are oftentimes seem insurmountable and very painful and stressful. And we already are raising an individual with special needs. So the last thing we want is more stress. But I can say, when you stay true to what you know is best for your child, that it is hands down absolutely worth it.
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. As I said, you have such a wealth of knowledge and resources and, experience on this journey. And, it's been so incredibly helpful for other families. So I really appreciate you sharing all of those things. And I'm really hoping that I'll be able to get a MAPS doctor on this podcast as well, to be able to share more about that. That's a great point that you brought up, and it's important information to get out there. So
For sure. For sure. I think every individual with autism deserves a MAPS doctor. And I would love to listen to your podcast as you interview one. So
yes, I'm excited about it. It's going to happen. Yes, I'd love to just kind of end with just a quick little update on how Adam's doing now, and if there's any kind of story you'd like to share, or anything that comes to mind, and kind of how he's doing, and just to kind of wrap up our conversation.
Adam is doing better and better every day. Like you said, we're not in a race. Autism, we often say autism is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We're in it for the long haul. And Adam continues to do better and better. And so I know I've had some kind of dark moments that I've shared, but that's the reality of it. If I were to say everything's been great with autism, I wouldn't have been being authentic and true. And so I don't mean to be negative or to appear negative, because Adam is a gift. He is beautiful. He is a beautiful person. He has changed so many lives. People who've had the opportunity to work with Adam in any capacity, they've made career changes. They have made personal changes. They have become better people. And I think a big part of his mission on this earth is to help others along their journey. He's helped others to grow and develop. He continues to grow and develop. He's recently, as you know, Brooke, he has begun to spell. So this whole assuming competence, boy, we know now more than ever how important that is, because he's spelling things that are amazing. This last Saturday, he was with one of his spelling practitioners, and they were doing a spelling story on La Jolla Cove. And she said, you know, make up a story about a day at La Jolla Cove. And he was like, well, I'm snorkeling on my own by myself, and a sea lion approaches me and starts circling me. And I feel a little bit scared. So I go back in, but then I see my friend Danny, and together we go back out and we snorkel together and we're not afraid. And so this is the amount of communication. I don't think I've told you that story
Oh, I love it.
on Saturday. And he was really, really excited to share the story that he created about a day at La Jolla Cove. And so he is sharing and opening up things that, I mean, because Adam has speech apraxia and because communication is hard for him, this spelling has been a huge breakthrough for him. And so that's another piece of advice I would give to any parent who has an individual with autism who struggles to communicate verbally is please look into a spelling program. That's another great podcast idea to have a spelling practitioner on here or an individual who spells. Anyway, so Adam continues to make progress in all areas of his life. We're still working biomedically on him because there was a lot of damage done with, what caused him to regress. So we're continuing to work on his physical health. We're continuing to work on his RDI goals. We're continuing to work in a spelling program. And he is just an inspiration to me. He is resilient. He is fun. He is funny. He has a great personality. Does that mean that I don't grieve? No, no. And those two truths can exist at the same time. I am hopeful. I am ecstatic. I am optimistic. I am grateful, and I grieve.
Mhm.
His cousin, who is his age, is finishing up his fourth year of medical school. His younger brother just celebrated his third wedding anniversary. There are things that Adam cannot up to this point do and may never be able to do. And so I grieve. Sometimes it comes out of left field. I'll see something or I'll hear something and I'll think, oh, that's something that Adam missed out on. And it hits me like a ton of bricks, like it does someone who's lost somebody, someone who has lost a person who has died, and they see somebody that looks just like their dad or it sounds just like their dad. And then it's just wave of grief washes over you. That still happens. And so for me to say that it is all roses and sunshine would be false. For me to say that it is all grief would be false. For me to say that it is this beautiful, bittersweet cocktail of the two combined would be the absolute truth. It is both. But one thing I will say is that we will never give up because Adam deserves that.
100%.
He deserves people in his life who will never give up and who will never stop advocating for him and who believe in him and who will never stop trying to help him live the most beautiful, productive, meaningful, happy life that he can. And so he'll be 27 in January, and I feel like we're just getting started. So we will always, always, and the beautiful thing is that his siblings feel that way too. He's got a great team of people who will never give up on him. And so that's another piece of advice I would give to parents too, is just never give up. There are times you may feel like it. There are times you will feel like we cannot take another step. We cannot do another day. This is so hard. And just don't ever give up. I mean, so far, my record of surviving and Adam's record of surviving horrible, no good, very bad, awful, devastating days is 100%. We've survived all of them. And so every parent and every child who out there, you can survive it too. That we have no choice but to. I mean, I guess there's always a choice, but really the choice is give up or not. And so never, ever, ever give up. Your child deserves that. They have every right to that. And you'll feel so good as a parent if you just stay the course.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, just I have always been so inspired by you as a parent and grateful to work alongside you as a parent and to be on this journey together. And I just feel so much gratitude for the example that you are for families out there. And it's incredibly inspiring. You are one of the most resilient parents I've ever worked with, and incredibly strong and powerful and knowledgeable. And, I think it's just, he's very blessed. Adam is very blessed, and your whole family is blessed to have you as their leader along this journey. And of course, your husband as well. You have a really, really incredible family. So thank you for sharing today and being honest and vulnerable and just speaking your truth. And, I'm hopeful that this will help other families and professionals as well. So,
Well, thank you. And thank you for your role in this, which has been huge. We definitely wouldn't be here today without your your support and guidance these last 16 years. And I look forward to our, continuing to work with you, because we know Adam has so much more to learn, so much more to share, and so much more to give. So we know that this learning is a forever thing.
It is. And the sky's the limit. We're just going to keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you again, Catina. Have a great day.
Thank you, Brooke.
I'm dancing on the edge again. The wind is calling my name. I'm dancing on the edge again. This time I'm not looking back.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only. The content shared is based on the experiences, opinions, and perspectives of the hosts and their guests, and should not be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. The discussions and topics covered are intended to foster understanding and awareness of autism therapies, but are not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Before making any decisions regarding therapies or treatments, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider who can provide personalized recommendations based on your unique circumstances. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and producers are not responsible for any consequences, damages, or outcomes arising from the use or application of any information during the show.